In 1896, George Merritt of the Canadian hockey team Winnipeg Victorias was the first ever hockey goaltender to wear pads to protect his legs. He and those who followed him used pads from another sport, cricket. Wider pads specifically for ice hockey didn't come about until the 1920s. This company spends $40,000 a year on research and development of goalie pads. It redesigns its pads every 2 years to upgrade to the latest materials and construction. Each goalie pad has 100 components. The factory uses hundreds of metal dies to cut parts to make pads in 15 sizes. Workers position the appropriate dies on the material. A hydraulic machine applies roughly the weight of 4 elephants, forcing the dies through up to 4 layers at once. Here, it's a synthetic water-repellent material called PU leather. The machine also cuts various types of foam for structure, protection, and comfort. And it creates holes called eyelets for laces or buttons. Here, the machine cuts soft, low-density foam which acts as a shock absorber against the force of the puck. Workers sew the pads using industrial-strength nylon stitching. To protect the PU leather, they sew on a layer of foam that's 1/8 of an inch thick, and zippers on openings that will be packed with shredded foam for a snug fit. They use a 1/2-inch thick layer of spongy foam to line the player's knee and calf areas for flexibility and comfort. The stitching is purely decorative. The factory often embroiders the player's name on the goalie pads to identify the gear if it's lost. This automated embroidery machine has 12 computer-guided heads. They use up to 40 different thread colors. Every year, this factory produces up to 3,500 pairs of goalie pads. The players wear an array of corporate logos on their pads. It's all part of the commercial nature of the game and the industry. Now they sew on a zippered pocket, which when filled with foam will protect the calf area. They use water-resistant fabric to cover the back of the player's leg and line the area with low-density foam to absorb the puck's impact. Then they attach flaps called knee raisers to protect the knee area. Good thing, given that pucks will slam the goalie at a speed of up to 100 miles per hour. Next, they sew the front and back parts of the pads together. Then they hot glue a sandwich of harder foam for structural support, soft foam for shock absorbency, and an even softer foam for comfort. This padding forms the guts of the pad. Using crimpers, workers fasten the pads together temporarily. Then they use a 7-inch long needle with a diamond-shaped tip to sew the layers together. The worker threads the layers, uniting them into one piece. This process is called lasting. Workers now pack the outside of the goalie pad with more rigid foam for structure and softer foam for comfort. They use clamps to fasten the boot area together temporarily while inserting shredded foam. Shredded because it's easier to squeeze in. Then, using a specialized sewing machine, they sew the outermost shell of the pad. This is considered the toughest part of the assembly, since it joins layers as thick as 1 inch. They use pliers to hold the pieces tightly together during the 45 minutes or so that it takes to sew just one pad. After trimming the excess from the ends, workers cover them with a strip of PU leather, a process called capping. They attach the strip using 13 overlapping stitches, a durability feature that gives the goalie pads long life. Next, they insert a removable knee guard, which can be adjusted or replaced later on. Using a rivet machine, they attach a leather strap to an adjustable nylon buckle. It's an important component. This is what fastens the pads to the leg. And at a price of nearly $1,600 a pair, you too can stop those speeding pucks with confidence. Goat cheese tastes harder than cheese made from cow's milk because goat's milk has a higher proportion of certain fatty acids which sharpen the flavor. There are hard and soft varieties of goat cheese. The soft ones are usually sold in logs or discs and often have a coating of peppercorns, chopped herbs, or other flavorings. The texture of soft goat cheese makes it ideal for spreading on crackers or crumbling over pasta or salads. Goat cheese is also called chèvre, the French word for goat. Farmers start breeding goats when the animals are a year old. The gestation period lasts 5 months, meaning milk production begins at the age of about a year and a half. The goats go for a milking every 12 hours or so. The first step is to manually squirt some milk into a cup to check the quality. If it looks good, they wipe the teats with disinfectant to remove surface bacteria. Then they hook up the automated milk extractor. A milking takes just 2 or 3 minutes. It typically yields 2 to 3 quarts. At the cheese factory, the goat's milk goes into a steam-heated pasteurization tank. An agitator stirs the milk non-stop to keep it from cooking. They heat the milk to 66 degrees Celsius, which kills off any bacteria. With the milk now pasteurized, they add bacterial cultures. These kickstart the fermentation. Then they add rennet. Diluted in water, rennet is an extract from calf stomachs. It contains enzymes which curdle milk. With the cultures and rennet in, workers now let the milk ferment for 18 hours. The result? Cheese curds in a watery liquid called whey. They ladle out the curds and put them in a cheesecloth bag to strain them. As they lift the bag, the sheer weight of the curds forces out much of the remaining whey. They tie up the bag and let the curds sit for another 18 hours, after which time workers strain them again. The goat cheese is finally ready. They weigh it and mix in just the right proportion of salt, 0.6%, to slow down the aging process. One of the formats this factory produces is 175-gram packages, so workers weigh out 175-gram blobs of cheese. Then, hand roll each blob into a ball, then flatten each ball into a disc. The disc goes into refrigeration until packaging time. The fridge temperature is 3 degrees Celsius, just above freezing. Some goat cheeses go for a roll in special flavorings. These are chives. Then it's into cellophane wrap and a plastic container. On the product label, they stamp a best before date. Unopened, goat cheese has a 2-month shelf life. Once opened, about a week. Another format is log-shaped. They roll this particular variety in a 5-pepper seasoning. Workers also hand-roll goat cheese balls. They go into a container with spices, sun-dried tomatoes, and olive oil. Goat cheese is a healthy food. It has twice the protein of cow's milk cream cheese, yet half the fat and cholesterol, and 1/3 fewer calories.
Invented centuries ago, grandfather clocks run on gravity. When you wind the clock, weights inside are drawn upwards. Gravity then pulls the weights down gradually, unwinding the cables and turning the hands of the clock. The proper term for this type of timepiece is a long case clock. The nickname grandfather clock came from a popular song from the 1800s. This long-established company makes its clock cases out of quality hardwoods, such as maple and oak. To construct frames for the four sides and door, workers fit dowels into holes, then secure the pieces together with screws and glue. They lay each frame in this curing machine that uses high-frequency radio waves to generate heat, drying the glue in seconds. Workers connect the four frames with screws and glue. They'll later attach the door frame with hinges. The next step is to assemble a base, again with dowels, glue, and screws. Once the glue is dry, the assembled frame goes into the base. Now for some embellishment. Computer-guided routers carve elegant wood moldings that give this particular model a traditional feel. Today's grandfather clocks come in styles to suit any decor. Workers carefully sand every single piece of wood in the clock case. The surface must be flawlessly smooth for it to absorb color evenly. The moldings are attached with a combination of glue and nails. These long pieces of wood become curved fluted moldings. They adorn the side of the door frame. This model also features a pair of stately columns above and below the flutes. A worker first positions them with glue, then screws them securely into the frame from behind. The next step is to stain the wood, hand rubbing it to bring out the grain. A coat of lacquer protects the wood and gives it a degree of sheen, from matte to glossy, depending on the model. After installing the glass and door, it's time to install the clock's components. Workers start with long metal bars called chime rods, 8 to 12 of them depending on the model. Each chime rod produces a certain different musical note when struck. Next comes a mechanism called the movement. It contains time-keeping components that trigger the chime hammers to hit the chime rods on the hour, half-hour, or quarter-hour. This company uses only top-quality all-brass movements imported from Germany. The chime hammers are also made of brass, but they have plastic tips, so you only hear the musical note, not the sound of metal striking metal. These brass pulleys hang from cables connected to the movement. The pulleys will support the clock's 3 weights. After connecting the movement to the clock dial, a worker inserts a decorative detail, a wood panel to frame the dial. Then she installs the clock's second hand into the center of a miniature dial. On the main dial, the hour and the minute hands are attached. Depending on the model, these aluminum hands are painted either black or gold. A decorative nut secures them. Finally, the all-important weights and pendulum. The weights are brass canisters filled with lead. Each one weighs almost 9 pounds. The pendulum sways from side to side at an even pace. This ensures that the clock keeps accurate time. It also drives the clock to chime on the hour or fraction of the hour. All you have to do to keep this clock ticking is wind it up about once a week. Up next, behind the scenes at a fuse factory.
There's nothing kids love more than candies they can pull and stretch, which probably explains why gummy candies and licorice have always been stick-to-your-teeth favorites, except with parents who don't have a family dental plan. Everyone calls this red licorice, but there's actually no licorice root in it. The ingredients are wheat, sugar, and corn syrup, with red food dye and both artificial and natural strawberry flavoring. They cook the mixture for 2 hours at 216 degrees. This slowly forms a thick paste. They cool it down, then put it through extruders. The extruders work like icing nozzles, shaping the paste into a design such as the twirls we see here. A water-lubricated knife slices the continuous strips into 7 and 8 inch lengths. The water also rinses off any licorice buildup on the blade. The cut licorice goes on aluminum trays. The stacks of trays then go into an oven to dry for 8 hours at 140 degrees. As the excess moisture evaporates, the licorice shrivels. Workers weigh the correct amount of licorice for each package. To make gummy candies, they use what are called printing boards, large sheets with raised shapes. To make gummy worms, for example, they mount the gummy worm board on a stamping machine. The machine then stamps the worm shapes onto trays of cornstarch. This creates a series of cornstarch molds for the gummy worms. While that's going on, another machine mixes gelatin, sugar, corn syrup, color, and flavoring, and cooks the mixture at 240 degrees. A machine called the depositor pours the mixture into the cornstarch worm molds. The molds then go into a refrigerated room. In 12 to 15 hours, the candies cool and solidify. A machine then flips the candies out of the trays. The cornstarch molds disintegrate. As they fall downward, the machine sifts out the lumps, then recycles the used cornstarch into new cornstarch trays for the next batch. The candies go through a cleaner. As they spin, air nozzles blast off the cornstarch. The next drum coats the candies with mineral oil to make them shiny. Children love gummy worms because they're gooey and slippery and wiggly. But it's not just kids who are hooked on them. Many fishermen actually use them for bait. Before packaging the candies, the workers weed out any that are stretched out or stuck together. Wonder if they get to eat the rejects. Haggis is Scotland's national dish made from minced lamb and beef, encased in beef intestine. While quintessentially Scottish, Historians believe haggis actually originated in ancient Greece and eventually made its way northward with the Romans to Britain. Haggis is traditionally served with mashed potatoes and turnips, what the Scots call neeps and tatties, along with a glass of Scotch whiskey to wash it down. At the haggis factory, the production process begins with beef fat. They put it through a mechanical chopper, and a guillotine blade slices it up. The chunks of fat go into a large cook tank. They fill the tank with water and simmer the fat for 2.5 hours. Then, using a strainer, they drain the cooked fat and put it in a tub. Then they empty the tub into a mincer. Next, they chop up lamb lungs. Haggis recipes sometimes also use heart and liver. They simmer those in a cooked tank as well for 2.5 hours. Using a strainer, they drain and remove the cooked chopped lungs and transfer them to a tub. They now take dried shredded onions and rehydrate them with some stock from the cooked meat. They pour the onion and stock mix into the tub with the cooked lungs. Then empty the whole thing into the mincer to join the ground fat. Next, 2 different grinds of oatmeal, medium and coarse, to give the haggis just the right texture, not too stiff, but not too loose. The consistency is key, which is why the grind proportions are a closely guarded company secret. Also a top secret, the composition of the spice blend they now add. All the company will divulge about this seasoning is that it includes salt and pepper. The oatmeal and spice blend now join the other ingredients in the mincer. And there you have it, the finished haggis mix, ready to be stuffed into casings. In keeping with tradition, the company encases its haggis in beef intestines. After a thorough cleaning, the intestines are stored in salt. Before use, they soak in cold water overnight to desalinate. This also softens them up until sufficiently pliable for the stuffing process. On the filling line, workers slip an intestine over what's called the stuffing horn. Then, with the knee, activate a lever that triggers the machine to pump out a set amount of haggis mix. On this run, they're preparing the 1 pound size. They close the casing on either side with a thick aluminum staple. Now they spread the haggis out on cooking trays and pierce each casing to let air escape as the casing shrinks during cooking. The temperature inside the steam oven is 230 degrees Fahrenheit. The haggis cooks for 1 hour, during which the casing shrinks and forms into a ball shape. Once the haggis come out of the oven and cool, workers cut them apart. Each haggis goes into a printed plastic bag, then into a vacuum sealer. The machine draws out 99.9% of the air before sealing the bag. This vacuum packing process extends a 7 to 10 day shelf life to 4 weeks. The packaged haggis now drop into a tank of hot water. The bags instantly shrink and thicken by 25%, making them significantly more durable. Haggis may date back to ancient Greece, but it's certainly changed with the times. This company also makes a 1-minute microwavable version, a canapé format, and even vegetarian haggis. Far beyond what Robert Burns could ever have imagined.